O'Hare, your next news update is at 8:30. Chicago's Morning Answer continues next on AM 560. The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Well, we finally have a definition of what constitutes a Christian nationalist, thanks to Politico correspondent Heidi Przybyla. This is what she said on MSNBC and part of her commentating on the South Carolina primary.
The one thing that unites all of them, because there's many different groups orbiting Trump, but the thing that unites them as Christian nationalists, not Christians, by the way, because Christian nationalists is very different, is that they believe that our rights as Americans, as all human beings, don't come from any earthly authority. They don't come from Congress. They don't come from the Supreme Court. They come from God.
That's one of the more remarkable statements I've heard in terms of characterizing that understanding as Christian nationalists, as uniquely Christian nationalists, and also, again, with emphasis, not Christian, says Heidi, but Christian nationalists. That's supposed to be frightening, that we believe our rights come from God, as did the founders, as is enshrined in our founding documents, endowed by our Creator, sort of an important phrase. But inalienable, another important word choice. But that it's Christian nationalists. That is what, and Christian nationalists is supposed to be a synonym for white supremacists. It's supposed to be very frightening, and we're going to impose a theocracy for white people, and this is authoritarianism, and so on and so forth. And yet the individuals who believe rights come from the state, as she must, and thus could be taken away by the state, are not authoritarians. I guess it's a simple thought experiment. I mean, under which construct do you think your freedoms would be most protected? The one where the government is to secure your freedoms and there are negative restraints on that government to prevent infringement upon your freedoms, or recourse is available if such infringements would occur? Or the whimsy of the political ruling class at any moment is the source of what rights and freedoms you enjoy? Under which sort of paradigm would you think you'd like to live? Heidi's or the so-called Christian nationalist paradigm? For more on this, please be joined by Ed Morrissey, senior editor at Hot Air, HotAir.com. Ed, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, good morning. Great to be with you.
I mean, I really sort of appreciate this excited utterance. You rarely have this moment for sort of a baseline, fundamental, first principles type of conversation on a cable news channel of all places. But this really is, the definition of a teachable moment, it would seem.
It would be. And I think it's also a demonstration of how badly we have educated people over the last 50 years about
no question
about the origins of our republic. I mean, this was based off of a political article, and I think Przybyla wrote it. I could be wrong about that, but it had appeared a day or two before that in Politico about Christian nationalism. And that was one of the arguments that was in the article. But another one was that these Christian nationalists were going to force men to pay for the support of children that they fathered, which was supposedly, I'm trying to remember exactly how it was phrased, but an unprecedented incursion into the private lives of Americans. And I'm sitting here, and I'm 61 years old. And I remember back in the 1970s that the feminists were very unhappy with deadbeat dads and wanted government involved in forcing them to pay support, right? I mean, we passed a bunch of laws where you had tax penalties for not paying your support, where you could be, thrown in jail for not paying support. Deadbeat dads were a very big deal in the 1970s and 1980s. And and there's reasons for that, because that was when the families were breaking down too, and fathers were simply skipping out on their obligations. So I mean, it's not just that the people who are arguing this stuff, and especially at Politico, it's not that they don't know American civics, it's that they apparently woke up and thought the world was created in 1999. It's amazing how ignorant this stuff is.
It is. I mean, and the interesting thing too, I looked her up. Heidi, I mean, she didn't just graduate from Oberlin yesterday. She's 50 years old.
Wow. Oh, I'm actually surprised by that.
Yeah.
I'm actually surprised by that, because this is just nonsense. Well, and I would say that I was probably on the hairy edge of the people who were educated in American civics in public school, right? Private school probably has done better with that, but in public school, I was probably out there on the edge of when they really stopped teaching what the foundation of the American Republic is, and it's the Declaration of Independence and it's the Constitution. And the Declaration of Independence makes it very clear that rights descend from the Creator, and that governments are formed to protect those rights, not to grant those rights, but to protect those rights as part of the dignity of for human beings. And the Constitution was crafted in a way that didn't grant rights, but prevented the government from infringing on those rights that the Declaration had declared, right? Which is that these rights were granted from the Creator, and governments could not legitimately infringe upon them. And in fact, it was such an issue for the states that they really forced the issue of the Bill of Rights, which then started specifically enumerating the rights that Congress and the government could not infringe. And so you have the right to speech, the right to assemble, the right to have your home safe from occupation by armed forces, the right to jury trial, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, we can go down the whole list.
Right.
Excessive fines, the Eighth Amendment, which is relevant these days in New York. But that's the structure of the American Republic. And for somebody to be on MSNBC and say that, these bunch of nuts think that our rights come from a creator and not from the government is just astounding to me. That person isn't laughed out of the public square is also very disappointing to me.
Well, it's astounding, or it's behavior modification. It's, this is the way that we insinuate this. Of course, and it's on MSNBC, and Christian nationalists are scary. That's why they use the term, evangelical Christians, the Christian right, all the varietals of that sort of smear that they've used over the last several decades in electoral politics, with the idea of, as I said at the outset, it's a white theocracy that's going to, prevent women from accessing health care and subjugate people who aren't descendants of the Mayflower, and all the other hysterics that they have to go through because they have to distract people's attention away from the results of their actual policies that they supported.
So, Ed Morrissey.
Oh, hi, Amy.
Hi. I wanted to ask you, we got a bombshell on Friday about some more information between Nathan Wade and Fani Willis. And if I called someone 2,000 times a year, how many times would I make a phone call to that person in a single day?
Well, I think it was over 11 months, right? So I did a calculation, and it had to be 6 calls a day, averaging 6 calls a day to get 2,000 calls in 11 months. It's 6, and then there were 12,000 texts.
Oh.
So that's 36 texts a day plus the 6 calls a day. I mean, I've seen teenagers less engaged in their first romance. I've seen teenagers be less engaged than this.
Well, I mean, let's not, throw a wet blanket on young love. I mean, the whole point here is, right, is that she has charged people with what looks to be crimes that she has also committed, and so that would ostensibly disqualify her from, number one, prosecuting those cases, her office from prosecuting those cases, and then we have the whole prosecution of Trump and associates very much in doubt. So that's in Fulton County, but we still have this problem, Trump does, I should say, in Manhattan, where that seems to be the one trial that will be adjudicated before the November election. And you have, if you're a betting man, knowing it's a Manhattan jury, and after what we've seen on the civil side, you have to believe that Trump is going to be convicted of some, ridiculous business records violation that
right.
Bragg has now turned into a felony. And then how does that play if Trump is running as a convicted felon? And I just, Trump talks about it, but he's not talking about that potential specifically. And I think he's doing a disservice to himself by not doing so, but not addressing what may come and how you should understand it if it does.
Well, I think they're going to have to start doing that. I mean, the trial is going to start on March 25th, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
This is a very weak criminal charge. First off, paying off somebody so they don't talk about the affair that you allegedly had, because he still denies that they had an affair at all, is not a crime. And it's not a crime even if you're running for office. The DOJ tried this with John Edwards, and a jury didn't buy it, and they ended up dropping it because they couldn't really figure out how to argue that it was a crime to have paid off. Riel Hunter, I think, was
Storm
his mistress.
Was Edwards, yeah, right.
Edwards' mistress, right?
Yeah.
This is a Stormy Daniels issue with Trump. And to put it into 34 charges, because there was there were like 17 pieces of a transaction is just prosecutorial overkill. He's likely to be convicted by a Manhattan jury, but I don't think that the conviction stands long. I think it's going to end up getting tossed once it gets appealed because there's just really no crime there, and I think that they need to be talking about that. But honestly, I think that this is baked into the cake. I think that voters on both sides are just assuming that he's going to be convicted at least one of these things. And I don't even think that this is really the big one. I think the big one would have been the obstruction of a grand jury subpoena, and that was at Mar-a-Lago in Florida, because that actually is a substantive charge. He actually did do that, and that's actually a crime, and it's a felony. And that, I think, was the biggest risk that he has politically and legally. I think voters have baked this into the cake by this point in time.
I don't know. I think that for your gooey swing voter in your swing state that is a surface skimmer, and you get a conviction anywhere for any reason, and you get to lob $500 million behind, we can't have a convicted felon in the White House for however long you can do that. I think it could be impactful if he doesn't address it straight away.
Well, it could be. I mean, again, but I don't know that anything that you're going to say at this point in time is going to change that dynamic too much. I think they're going to have to start thinking about that type of messaging. I think they may be waiting until after, because why do that messaging if you end up being acquitted, right? Why go through all that if you end up being acquitted? So I think they're waiting for the trial to finish before they figure out what the messaging is going to be.
Well, I mean, that's a mistake. I'll tell you why you do it, even if you get acquitted. Because if you get acquitted, you say, I'm as surprised as anyone. We must have had one or two brave New Yorkers on that jury that said, "I'm not going along with this rigged prosecution."
Right.
And that's an easy out for an acquittal. And up front, you say, "Look, I'm telling you right now what's going to happen. So come along with me. I recognize what we're dealing with here, and you need to recognize it too. And you need to properly understand that as much as you've been conditioned to believe in equal justice before the law, and we have to respect jury decisions, and we have to believe in our justice system because we need a legitimate justice system to have a free society, and all those things are true, but there are instances where the justice system is not righteous, where prosecutions are wrong, malicious, run afoul of societal norms and maybe even the law, are political in nature. And a lot of people, we have myriad examples over America's history of this, and this is another one. So you have to factor that in with whatever comes from this Manhattan trial, because it is a rigged deal.
Yeah,
and
I
think
how's that different than what he's been saying? He's been saying that all along. He's been saying it's rigged. He's been saying it's illegitimate.
He's not saying I'm going to be. He's not saying I'm going to be convicted. He's not saying I'm gonna be convicted. That's the moment. I am going to be convicted. You need to forget the Al Capone stuff. You can say it if you want. I've been indicted more than Al Capone and this and that. And I get the whole rig. He's got that part of it. But you have got to say, I am going to get convicted. Watch me. And remember, I told you this is how it's going to go down, because this is the nature of what we're dealing with. And it's not just me. And this is the other broader message. He needs to bring that back in. This isn't just about me. It's about the dad in rural Pennsylvania. It's about the Catholics targeted by the FBI. It's the same deal. And the whole rationale for my candidacy is we cannot have two systems of justice based on your political beliefs. And that's what we have right now. And I'm sort of a patient zero with respect to that. I think that is much more explicit than what he's offering.
Yeah, but I mean, he's got time, too. I mean, this trial's going to start on March 25th. It's probably going to take, maybe 3-4 weeks tops. I mean, there's not a lot of stuff to this trial. There's not a lot of stuff to this indictment. So he gets convicted in, say, April 25th. Let's just pick a month out. Well, that still gives him 6 months to make all those points that you just said without having to say, I'm going to be convicted. And then he can say, I was convicted and it was nonsense. And here's the reasons why.
I don't know.
I mean, I don't know that you need to buy that misery ahead of time. I don't think you need to pre-buy it. I think you wait until that point comes, and you've got plenty of time to message it.
I always think you get more credit when you predict what's going to happen and it happens ahead of time. But I hear you. I want to get your take on something else. The sweepstakes to be Trump's running mate. We had some people auditioning at CPAC over the weekend. Do you have any particular insight or preference?
I don't think I have any insight. I mean, I think what he's going to be looking for is somebody who is, it presents, hopefully that's going to plug some gaps, right? I know that Tim Scott's been getting a lot of attention. He's a good guy. He's great on the stump. Tim Scott is great on the stump. He'd be a good running mate. But I think, traditionally Republicans tend to like governors better, and I think he's got a couple of choices there. I think he's got Kristi Noem, who's clearly auditioning for this, and she's very good on the stump, and she's a governor, and she's very much in line with Trump's policies. And I think you've got Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who I think is kind of being overlooked here, but she worked with Trump very successfully during his term as president. She's governor in Arkansas. And I think she might be a good running mate, somebody who is very good at handling the media, by the way. And either one of those two, I think, would be good. I'm not sure where he's going. I just think that if he picks Tulsi Gabbard, it's a huge mistake. You don't really want to stunt here. He's 77 years old. He'll be 78 by the time the election rolls around. You really need to be thinking about somebody who could be president before the end of 4 years, and that's not Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah, totally agree with that. Ed Morrissey, senior editor, Hot Air, HotAir.com. Ed, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
You're listening to Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Signature Bank is Chicago's fastest growing independently owned business bank. It's a bank where relationships still matter. Signature Bank knows your name